the only way to ensure Roe v. Wade is overturned is to amend the Constitution. I definitely don't think that's going to happen because you have to convince 3/4 of the states to vote for that. And there's definitely more than a quarter of the states in this country that are pretty blue and would not go for that. So then what you have to decide is, are the courts willing to take a position that says even if 95% of the country was in favor of abortion, would we overturn it because it violates the Constitution? I mean, just backing up a little bit, that is one of the rules of the courts, right? In many ways, it's anti-majoritarian. Like, if there are 55% of Americans that don't believe in the right to free speech, they can't pass a law that takes that away because the Constitution says you have the right to freedom of speech. Now, there are exceptions to that, right? Like, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. You can't engage in activity that creates a clear and present danger to national security. Like, there's some exemptions to that. But by and large, we have the freedom of speech in this country, right? You can't pass a law, for example, that says, I'm not going to let you publish your book because I don't like your political viewpoint. That would, you would get a court order so quickly, you wouldn't even be able to blink before you would get ripped to shreds for doing something like that. And the point is, what the Constitution has done is put some things outside of the realm of popular debate. Like, we're not going to debate whether people get free speech because they do. And if you want to change it, you better convince 3/4 of Americans and 2/3 of Congress to change that. And so that's why something like Roe v. Wade is such a big deal, because it elevates the issue of abortion outside of the realm of popular debate and places it in this constitutional status that kind of almost like exempts it from debate, right?
Yes.
And so many of and again, without sharing necessarily my viewpoint on it, like on the same-sex marriage issue, if you read Justice Scalia's opinions from the time, he dissented from those opinions pretty strenuously. And one thing he said was basically, look, same-sex couples are winning and passing laws across the country. What the court has done today is they've taken kind of that apparent victory and done it through a judicial decision. So they didn't win by convincing people to pass laws. They did it by convincing 5 judges that no one ever elected to do it for them, right? And there's different points of view on that, right? And so if you think it's a constitutional right, you're not going to want a legislature to decide whether you should have it or not, because the point is to keep it out of the hands of the legislature.
Yeah.
But, that was one of his points. But I think that, Roe v. Wade, the more likely scenario, without necessarily tipping towards my thoughts too much, is that I think you could see maybe a death by 1,000 cuts where they won't say we're overruling it, but if a state, say, passes a real restrictive law, they don't overturn it, right? They still maybe give lip service to Roe v. Wade, but they say, sure. So maybe what you have is a scenario where abortions are easier to access in blue states than in red states.
Yes.
So then will you have this kind of flight of people going from red states across from Indiana to Illinois to get an abortion, or from Alabama to Georgia, or from Virginia to Maryland, or from New York to, I don't know, whatever, New Hampshire.
Their bass player got in some trouble here in town, and they fired him, and they called me. They were like, hey, man, we know you're not a total screw-up. Do you think you could figure out bass within the next 3 weeks? And I was like,
holy
absolutely.
Cow.
So sat down, learned as much as I possibly could, enough to at least like fake it through some songs. And, came here, we played a song, they were like, cool, let's go to Moscow.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So first show and then tour I did was Moscow, Russia, and then we did a month in Europe.
That was your first tour?
Yep.
Moscow, and then you went to Europe for a month?
Yeah.
After they said about 3 or 4 weeks prior, hey man, you want to be bass player for our band, Three Doors Down?
Yeah.
Go learn the bass and then let's go on tour for a month.
Yeah. I was
Dang,
working.
man. Talk about baptism by fire. I mean,
Yeah,
seriously,
crazy.
That is insane.
I had whatever they call I was at a restaurant I was working at back home.
You were in Nashville at the time?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You were not living in Nashville at the time.
Yet. No.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I was
you were
coming
living
back
in
and
Nashville.
forth.
You would come back and forth a lot.
Yeah.
And you were coming over here to sort of learn the industry, get around the people.
Yeah.
You were writing some songs or learning about that. So that's what was bringing you here. It was not Three Doors Down specifically.
Not Three Doors specifically
Right.
yet. So
Yeah.
I'd been coming over like almost every weekend for a year and a half. Like I'd get off work and I'd drive over, songwrite for like 2 days, and then drive back.
And when you'd songwrite for a couple of days, that was mostly you're all country?
Yeah, that was all country.
So at this point, you're on track for just kind of expanding your career in country music.
Yeah.
Well, I guess not expanding because you weren't doing necessarily country before that, but like you were on a country music trajectory. That's what was bringing you to Nashville.
Yeah, I didn't really know it, but yeah, it definitely was.
I see. And then the Three Doors thing happened, and you remember where you were at when you got the phone call?
Yeah. Our guitar player, Chris, he called me. He was like, hey, man, take this serious. He was like, we're serious about you. It's not a joke. Like, take it serious and do everything you can to figure this out. And I was like, all right.
If you were right now in this interview just shouting solo, it wouldn't really matter what I said. Yeah. I could say, listen, I want you to know I'm Jesus. I just showed up, and this is the second coming. And nobody listening would hear that because you're shouting all the time. So what you've got is the bright, shiny object that's Donald Trump. Everybody's paying attention to that. And saner heads are wanting to say, he's done more for African Americans. This is actually statistically true. He's done more for African Americans than anyone since Lincoln. Now, I know they'll be debating that in grad schools for years to come. But statistically, you can make that case. You might have to throw LBJ in there, but that's debatable because some people would say that he's made it worse. He did an amazing, and I guarantee you, I do a lot in the African American community. I'll be willing to bet you that in a year, when everything calms down, we're down the road. I say that to a group of my African American friends, or when I'm speaking at a HBCU, and they're shocked. Mm-hmm. They're shocked. Now they trust me because I guest lecture on African American history, and so they see me as a white guy who gets what they're dealing with. But if I make that statement in a year, they're going to be totally shocked because they have not heard it. A campaign is about making sure that's heard.
Yes.
A campaign's about making women voted largely against Trump, especially older white women. But he's done more for women than most presidents. Mm-hmm. Does anybody, except those of us like geeks like you and me who study this stuff, do they know that? No, because the campaign couldn't get it across. So that's the problem. You've got the screaming, loud, draw all attention, insist on, by the way, I mean, fine, have the big rallies if you want to. That's not the best way to communicate the facts to the swing voters. And so the problem with the Trumps is they don't trust experts, they don't trust eggheads, they don't trust consultants. And so they go and do what they want to do. He likes doing those big rallies. That's what they did. They don't win campaigns. I'm just telling you that they look good on TV, but they don't win campaigns.
Is that because a campaign is seen as sort of drinking the Kool-Aid? And if you're on the fence, you're not going to go to a campaign and they're just going to do their thing and they're all going to get all on board for Trump. But you need facts and data and information coming from printed sources or TV or something compelling you or giving you good reasons why you should consider Trump. Is that why campaigns are not good to catch people on the fence?
Exactly. The conventional wisdom is that ever since the Reagan era, you wanted to appeal to the Reagan Democrats. Okay, you wanted to appeal to those who are centrists, those who are undecideds or independents. What Trump does is he drills down into his base and hopes to mobilize his base and thus get more votes that way. But let me assure you that nobody is showing up for a massive rally during COVID-19 who's not already sold. Right? Those long lines that we saw.
Yeah, good point.
And there ain't no undecided sitting there. They're not risking their lives to make a decision at the polls that makes that decision in front of their big screen. What they're doing is they are going there to cheer on the guy they love. They got MAGA hats on. They're waving flags. They're dressed up in Trump masks. This is the crowd. This is your gang. These are your voters in Pennsylvania. These are your voters in Nevada. You haven't convinced anybody. So he can get back on Air Force One and feel great. But those of us, and I'm being a little boastful here, who know a little bit about campaigns having worked in them, we can tell you that you don't gain new ground with those. Nobody's sitting home going, man, he had a big crowd in Pennsylvania. I think I'll vote for him. No, they're sitting at home because they have to overcome images of you that may not be true. Where was the campaign that had a scroll? Did more for African Americans than any president since Lincoln. Or don't say that since it's insidious. Did huge amount. All the things. Suppose that you and I wrote a commercial that was based basically on putting those there in a scroll or having Tom Selleck say, let me tell you some things you don't know. And say that over the next 60 seconds, that would have turned that generation. By the way,
totally agree.
70-year-old white women could have won him this election. And I can't think of one commercial that was targeted that way.